Hey everyone, welcome to my first video tutorial. So I was plugging away at blog posts this week and I stumbled across this guy, this little Conan cartoon character for free on high-end 3D, rigged with AdvancedSkeleton. I've been seeing a lot of AdvancedSkeleton as I kind of search around for free rigs, and I wanted to give it a shot, see what it looks like getting into Unity, what kind of stuff I have to clean up, and just in general how easy the rig itself is to work with. So I was just going to do a quick, maybe 15-minute video on getting this guy set up, referenced into an animation file, and into Unity, and hopefully even getting him mapped to some default animations that are in there, and get him running around in game. I thought that'd be pretty cool. Plus, I needed a break from writing. I was pretty bored. Just needed a little creative time. All right, so we're going to be using Maya 2016, as you can see here, and I'm currently set up to use Unity 5.5.2. 5.6 is on its way out, but I didn't want to get the beta yet because who knows what's going to happen or what's broken. So anyway, we have our free Conan here. So the first thing we need to do is check out the hierarchy. Outliner. So what is the face group? So this looks like a bunch of constraints, geometry. So the geometry is broken up into multiple pieces. I usually prefer to merge this down as much as possible. The more pieces of geometry you have, the more draw calls you have, and the more expensive it can be. I mean, it depends on the game. You don't want to over-optimize, but typically I would at least merge the eyes together. The hair I would merge with the main body. What else do we have in here? And there's a lot of extra pieces in here that if you have a lot of characters like this, or you duplicate this character a lot, it could increase the draw calls and thus reduce the performance of your game. But we're just going to leave this as is, not going to mess around with it too much because we don't have to redo the skinning or any of that. Let's just check out the rig real quick. I stumbled upon an extra piece of geometry in here that we probably won't need. So there's this body base and body base 1. Let's go ahead and check to see what that is linked to before we go and delete it. It doesn't... It looks like these are blend shapes for the eyebrows. Let's go into the blend shape editor and see what we have. Aha! We have a bunch of blend shapes. Like some of them don't do anything. Oh, there we go. Some eyebrow raises. Okay, so I guess we will keep those so we don't destroy the blend shapes for now. The other thing I found was, in order to get the joints to show up, so the fit skeleton looks like it's nothing but just a placement. Okay. So let's hide that again. Nothing but a placement skeleton. So the deformation system is where the skinning is actually happening. Yeah, there's some constraints. Okay, now let's hide that geometry again, then we'll hide that other rig. And we'll show some of these guys. And just gonna speed this up real quick and hide the controls. So we're gonna go to component mode and we're gonna hit the question mark. So that shows all of the joint orientations. Probably could have done that without showing the joints, but that's alright. So Y is forward, Z is to the side, and X is pointing down the chain. So this is pretty much what I was looking for. Just to make sure that there wasn't anything wacky, like that these rotations weren't off in any way. That just makes it easier for Unity to handle those. Especially if you need to like dynamically control the head. Like say you wanted always the head to look at something. You wouldn't want a weird offset in the Y-axis or the Z-axis, because you can only really control one pivot point, and you don't want to have to do crazy math to figure out how it should be looking. So yeah, this looks pretty good. Let's go back to the way it was. Show that geometry back up, and let's just hide those joints. These must be our face controls. Yeah. Cool. I just wanted to get these tools working so I could quickly zero out controls. If you want details of what these tools do, you can check out my blog. It's www.games.write.com. So let's continue on with this guy. I'm just going to move some controls around, see how he works. A little kung fu pose. Alright, so the rig looks, fairly decent. I didn't really put it through too much of its paces, but for the most part it looks alright. Blend shapes are a little cool. Like the eyelids move. Cool. Alright, well let's see what it takes to get this guy in game. I'm just going to select all these, zero out that. Okay, so we're going to export our base model first. What that is it's going to be a model that we use to create the prefab in Unity, and we're going to hook all the animations up to that prefab, which means that we're also going to make a reference file, and we're going to maybe just do a quick animation or something. So yeah, let's get the base rig file in. So this is a destructive process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this out first, and I guess I'm going to show you guys the difference between the method that I'm going to use and the default method for getting into Unity. So there is an option to just send directly to Unity. So we're going to do a quick export just with this. We're going to do all. We're going to go to characters. We're going to create a new folder. Conan. We're going to name this Conan non. We're going to call this default export. So we're going to go through the settings. We want animation. You don't want to bake the animation because there's no animation on this file. We want the deformed models. We're also going to export the blend shapes. Maybe we'll do something a little bit with that later. Oh, let's see. One thing I forgot to check is what unit we're in. So we're actually in centimeters in this file, and we don't want to be in centimeters. So I'm going to go back, double check my settings. Go to the settings. So we want to be in meter. Unity likes meters. We want Y up, and we want 30 frames per second. Unity plays animations at 60 frames. The animation usually gets done in 30, and Unity will scale it for you. I typically leave everything at 30 unless I explicitly need it. I usually go 60 for like mocap, for fighting games, but most games I stick with 30 in my Maya files. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to the new scene option box. And I'm going to make sure my settings in here match what I just set. So I'm going to set this to meter. I'm going to set this to 30 frames per second and hit apply. Well, yeah, I'm just going to hit apply. I'm not going to save that. So basically what that is going to do is whenever I create a new scene, so file, new scene, don't save, that's going to make sure that all my settings are going to remain that way. So you want to make sure that that gets set, otherwise you're always going to have to go back and double check this. It's caught me a couple times, especially when upgrading Maya. Just make sure you go back to your new scene options and set this to be the default that you want. If you're using Unity, meter, and 30 frames a second. Alright, so let's go back to Conan. So the other thing to do is make sure that you're in the 0 pose. You want to make sure none of these controls have any translation or rotation or scale values in them, because we want it to be in the most default position that it reaches. So this is basically the skin pose. And this is so Unity doesn't get confused when you export the animations, because animations are essentially offsets from the default pose. So if you export the default pose in a weird position, the default or the default position will be off, and you will be basically offsetting it from a different position, which you don't want to do. So now we're going to send this to Unity. Into Unity, all. So we're in meters now. Scale factor is going to be 1. And I'm going to name this Conan default export. Export all. So that's going to go and export a bunch of stuff. Got some errors. Unsupported constraints. Could not find the bind pose. We'll just ignore those for now and see how it goes. So the other thing I'm going to do is, before we go and dive into what exported, I am going to set up a custom export rig, which is basically I'm going to remove everything but the joints and the meshes. I usually create a script that does this. I actually have a script installed right now that'll do this. It won't work with this rig because my script assumes certain names. So what I'm going to do is save this scene out. We're going to name this Conan export. Save. And I'm going to be destroying things. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to leave the geometry alone. I'm going to delete the face group. See what that does. So basically what I'm doing is I delete this is I'm making sure nothing moves. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go into the deformation system and I am going to bake all the joints down to a single frame. So what this will do is it'll essentially make sure that when I delete all of these controls, nothing will move, because we want to keep it in its skinned position or its bind pose so that we don't screw up our animation. So we're gonna select the deformation system. I want to do below my selection, I'm going to do start and end. I'm going to do 0 to 1 because we only need one frame. There's no actual animation in here. And then I'm going to hit bake. And that will put a key on every joint down here. So as you can see, everything is red now. So that will make sure that when I delete the controls, I'll leave the geometry alone, delete that. I want to delete the motion system, which apparently is the rig. And then I'm actually going to do a couple other things. So I'm going to take this model geo. I'm going to take all of the objects out of here, and I'm going to put it at the root. I'm going to do the same thing for the deformation system. I'm going to take the root joint, I'm going to drag that out, put it at the root of the scene, and then I'm going to delete the rest of it. So now essentially all I have is a skeleton, which is skinned to the model, and I have my meshes. Now it looks like from dragging this around, there's actually geometry in here that is not skinned. So I'm going to leave that there. And the other thing I'm going to do is, you notice here how it says model : that's a namespace. So I'm actually going to take that namespace out so that I don't have to deal with it later. This will just make it harder for things to sort, and it'll make it just kind of confusing in Unity. So I'm going to open up the namespace editor, which is under Windows, General Editors, Namespace Editor. I'm going to select the model namespace. I'm going to say delete, and I'm going to merge that with the root. So as you can see, it took those namespaces out, and that'll just make it easier for me later. So now that that's done, I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to do my send to Unity. And we're going to name that Conan again, but we're going to name that full export. So and then we're just going to check our settings. So we want to do animation, deformed models, basically the same stuff we had. And then we want to make sure that this is meters, as it is. And then we're going to do export all. It's going to do its thing. We have far fewer errors this time. And now let's go into Unity and see what we got. Okay, so the first thing I notice is that we didn't actually want the animation on this guy. But that is fine, because what we're going to do is we're going to turn off import animation for both of these. Again, this is going to be the base rig file or the base model file that we're going to be applying animations to. So we don't actually need animations on them. But one thing we do need to do is set these to use the humanoid rig. So one thing to notice is when we drag the full export in with those export settings, the file scale and the scale factor are both set to 1. However, the nodes themselves have a scale factor of 0.01. Now, in order to fix that, we need to go back into Maya. Since we're going to go back into Maya, we'll take some time to fix that other error that we had, scale compensation error. this little guy. Nodes with scale compensation. It's not supported by Unity. So I dug into the rig a bit, and it turns out, like if you go to the, select the root, you hit Control A, all of these were selected. So I went through and fixed about half of them. As you can see, only about half of his body shows up properly. So let me show you exactly what I did to fix that. So I opened up his hierarchy. So his left shoulder should still be set up to be scale compensate. So yeah, these are all set on here. So these basically need to be off in order to get the proper scale in there. It's like the fingers aren't set up. So the hip, boom, and boom. Okay. So now that that's done, I'll delete this extra guy that I created. And I will go back into my settings just to make sure that I have things right. So 1 meter, 30 frames a second, Y up. Close that out. Since Unity added this thing in their meta files called use file scale. So if I load up the meta file for this Conan, this use file scale is always set to default, which has been a big pain for our projects, especially at work, because we set our Maya up properly before, and with this use file scale it kind of screws everything up. So Maya's native units are centimeters. So when we scale it to meters, it actually sticks a 0.01 scale in all of its objects so that it maintains its spacing and its relative size. However, because we want to export cleanly, we don't want that. So what we're going to do is, instead of, here, let me hide this again. So when we export, we're going to go send to Unity all. We're going to name it the full export, and instead of leaving this automatic, which it was before, we're going to turn that off, set this to centimeters, and you'll see that the scale factor turned to 100. So what that means is basically to get rid of that 0.01 scale in all of our joints, we're going to basically multiply them by 100 when we export. So when we export all, yes. Go back into Unity, delete this guy, and pull the full export back into the scene. And you'll see that now everything has a 1 scale. Now I was getting around this earlier by going into the, like I said, the meta file and turning use file scale off. So if I turn this off, you'll see that that jumps it up. That bounces it back up to 100. And the scale is basically all out of whack now. So everything is still 1, but because Maya's native units are centimeters and Unity's native units are meters, there's a conversion issue there. And the only way to really get around that and not have to go into the meta files every time and change this value, scale it back down, is to basically export in centimeters from the Maya export scene. Now I'm going to have to go back and change some of my blog posts, and I'll go back and edit this video so that it doesn't mislead you. But actually, I might just leave it so that you see the whole process. Anyway, regardless, so the only point, or the only place that you'll see a 0.01 scale now is in the file scale option itself, and that's not too big of a worry. Just forget about that. The main issue, or the main thing we wanted to solve, is when we exported this file, we got a scale factor of 1 for every object in this hierarchy. So that's what you have to do to get this guy in. So another thing I wanted to call out is the actual scale of the unit itself. Now, it wasn't so much of an issue with this guy. This guy was actually set up properly. So what I have here is a 1x1 cube, just a standard 3D object. Typical sizing for this stuff is to use real-world human sizes. So the average typical male is 1.8 to 2 meters. So what we want to see when we get into Unity is basically like when we create a 1x1 cube and we bring this character in at a scale value of 1 in all of its import and export settings, except for the file scale, is we actually want this cube to be about half this character's height. And that will basically set your scale for your entire game and will properly animate physics and will just work cleaner for everything involved. You also want to do the same kind of scale for your environment models. So this video ran a little long, so I'm going to cut this up into two. So the next video we're going to go over how to set this guy up with Mechanim, how to create animation references with that rig file that we created in Maya, or that we had in Maya, and map this guy to keyboard shortcuts so that we can get him running around the game, or running around inside Unity, and just start messing around with him. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm gonna put a written version of this on my blog, www.gamesmaderight.com. Get in there, check it out, and let me know what else you want to see. Thanks.